I am communicating with the cosmos. No, wait. Not the cosmos. With the comments. The viewer comments. They speak. They say, "Unrested. We like your show. Thanks, I like that you like my show. But wait, there is unbalance. There is displeasure. There is annoyingly long intros. Oh. Okay. Well, commenters, I not only read your critiques, but I listen as well. So with that, let those seductions begin. Oh, there, see? It's done. Are you not entertained, viewers? Anyway, let's begin. Our first story. Well, there are some games out there that are copies of copies. There are games that are boring FPSs. There's extremely boring RTSs. And then we have those games that take the road less traveled. And then we have games that take the fourth wall and break it down like a wrecking ball. No Miley Cyrus pun intended. The game I speak of is LSD Dream Emulator, an underground indie game from Japan very few know about, but quite a few have tried on YouTube Let's Plays. Those of you who don't know about this game, let me first tell you that it is in fact 100% real. Literally, after I finish this story, you can go download it. But before you do that, please listen to my short tale and then make a decision for yourself whether or not this game is for you.
A few years ago, while searching on X on 4chan for paranormal or creepy games, I came across an obscure Japanese PlayStation game called LSD Dream Emulator. Despite the game releasing in extremely limited numbers, many ROM sites had it available for download. Naturally, I downloaded it, converted it, and started playing. Unfortunately, the ISO was corrupted, or incorrectly ripped, as I couldn't get any further than the title screen, and when I did, all I saw was a mess of color and heard a strange fuzzy sound like radio static. I tried re-downloading the ISO multiple times, trying it from different websites, but every single one was the same strange colors, fuzzy, static, sound, etc., etc. I tried posting questions on various gaming sites, but hardly anyone had heard of the game and even less had played it. I learned that the game had a cult following, both here and in Japan. And eventually I found a small Yahoo fan group dedicated to the game. I posted a question asking if anyone had managed to get the game working on emulators. And a few days later, I received an answer. Hi. I was one of the members of the ripping group who released the LSD RIP. We managed to successfully rip the game, but we have never managed to get it working, neither on our emulators or the original hardware. By this point, I had practically given up on it. I didn't have a PlayStation console, and my attention span was short, and I had long since moved on to other things like Eversion and Yume Nikki. Then, earlier this year, LSD was released on the Japanese PlayStation Network. I remembered how much I had tried to play it, even browsing eBay a few times in the vague hope that a cheap copy surfaced. So, I made an account, bought a Japan PSN card, and purchased the game. After downloading and installing it, I began playing it. The PlayStation logo came up, as usual, but with the SCEI instead, as it was a Japanese game. There was no copyright screen, but they had removed it from a lot of games, so I really didn't care. The intro video started playing after that. It was all sorts of different colors and words bounce across the screen, spelling out "linking the sapient dream" multiple times. Apparently, I guess this is what LSD stood for. I pressed the circle button and the game went to the title screen. There was no press start screen, it just went straight to a screen with 4 or 5 options: start, save, load, and options. Above start there was a line of text telling you what day you were on. It displayed day 01. I chose start. One thing I had learned from the Yahoo group was that the first day always started in a Japanese house with 3 floors. The contents of the house were random. The entire game was played in a first-person view. I walked along the hallway I started in and walked into a bookcase, and the screen faded to white. That's the strange thing about this game. You can interact with anything. Walking into anything moves you to a new area, which the game calls linking. The white faded away, and I was in a field. I couldn't see very far into the distance because every area had fog a few feet ahead of you. The graphics were also basic, with most having no textures to them at all. I walked onwards, eventually bumping into a tree, which sent me to another area. This time, things had gotten a bit more sinister. I was in a dark city, standing out on a metal pier. A boat loomed in the fog, out on the water, and lampposts lit the streets. I walked down into the road and came across alleyways. Graffiti covered some of the walls. Strange, multicolored eyes were staring out at me. Then I heard a noise, and the screen flashed quickly. I turned around. Just behind me, a man had appeared. He was wearing a gray hat and a long trench coat. He was walking slowly towards me, almost gliding across the ground. I tried to walk backwards to get away, but my controller wasn't responding, and he was getting closer. For a split second, 2 red dots glared out from under his hat. Then the screen flashed again. This time I was back in the house. Something had changed, though. The textures of the walls were replaced with pictures of real violence. Women being raped, children being torn apart, cannibalism, torture. A Japanese man was breaking his own fingers with a hammer in one picture. As I moved through the house, the pictures slowly began getting worse and worse. The music began distorting and slowing down. The corridor was longer than it was before, and it was getting darker. I knew that the end was near. The dark man was very near to me at this point. I moved onwards, the bile rising in my throat, and I was fighting the urge to vomit as pictures began escalating into a terrible level of obscenity and violence. A few steps forward and it was a man removing a young boy's legs. A few more and it was a pregnant woman cutting her own fetus out. Further still, a gang of men cut a cow to pieces, wrapping the internal organs around their bodies. Closer to the end, it was a picture that was a moving gif. People being forced to eat the corpse of a child and vomiting as they tried to consume parts of him. Finally, I reached the end of the corridor. The screen faded to black and a line of text appeared on the screen. It was a link. OharaWeb, weebly.com/lsdgmn.html. I wrote the link down quickly, and a few seconds later, the game faded to white. I returned to the title screen. This time, the status said, D. day 00. I tried to choose start again, but the game wouldn't let me continue. I restarted the PS3, and the status went back to day 01. I played it again. I tried the link. It still worked, and the page came up filled with Japanese writing. Further down the page there was a picture of a gray man, as he normally appeared, just like the one in the game who had been in a dark hat and a dark trench coat with the red eyes staring out from underneath. I can't read Japanese, but one of my friends could, so I asked him to look at the site. He had lived in Japan a few years, so he could read and speak the language fluently. I copied down the writing and called him up. He showed up and spent a few hours telling what had happened, and then he didn't believe me, so I thought, who would believe this? It is a bit strange. So I thought, why don't I just let you take a look at the page? Despite several tries, he couldn't get the web page up, so I handed him a copy I had luckily made via cache. He glanced at it for a few minutes, then suddenly turned white. He handed it back to me and sat down on the couch. He said nothing for 5 minutes, then he told me what it said. If you are reading this, well done. You have seen the man as he is. What he did to me as I slept. As I dreamed this dark nightmare, you have also seen it. Those violent images were him. He had no form, only the dream man. He caused all of this. Those events in the images, he took those innocents and possessed them. He made them. He made them do it. He made me make this game. Gray, 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 gray. That was the last thing written at the bottom. As he finished, he stood up. He grabbed his coat and said, "Whatever you saw in that game, just don't even tell me about it. I don't want to hear about it." And then he left. The next week, he went back to Japan. I couldn't touch another console after that. I destroyed the PS3 and replaced my computer. A few weeks after he had left for Japan, I got a call. He had killed a woman and then committed suicide. The woman he had killed? Osamu Sato. She was the lead designer on LSD. If you guys are wondering, the game does actually exist.
Good. My file is finally done downloading. I have a brand new creepypasta straight from Japan for you. It is called Stacked Faces. Junichi was in a traffic accident that resulted in him getting whiplash. He took a week off to recover more quickly. He was married, but his wife worked full-time, so he was alone all day. For the first 2 days, he found the solitude relaxing. But by the third day, he had had enough. He was still in too much pain to go out on his own, though he thought staying in was a much better idea. After lunch one day, he was watching TV when he heard a thudding, and what he thought sounded like a child's cheerful voice. Junichi doubted that the school had a vacation that day, but he didn't really mind if they were skipping class. The next day, he heard 2 children's voices from upstairs. Apparently, whoever lived above them had 2 kids. The apartment complex Junichi lived in was quite large, but the afternoons were uncomfortably quiet, so he could easily hear the children's voices through the walls. He wasn't annoyed, not annoyed at all by them. In fact, he found the voices to be a nice break in the boredom and silence that surrounded him. The next day, he didn't feel like cooking for himself, so he called to have a pizza delivered. When it came 30 minutes later, he was surprised at how much there was. He ate as much as he could, but he still had leftovers. Normally, he'd just save it for his wife, but he thought of the kids upstairs. He thought, they might like to have it instead. Before the past few days, Junichi had no idea anyone even lived above him. He rang the doorbell, and when someone got to their door, he could tell somebody was there, but nobody answered it. So he rang the bell again. Finally, he saw a shadow behind the peephole.
Who is it?
A soft voice asked from the other side of the door. Junichi explained that he lived downstairs and that he had some leftovers for the children. The door opened just a crack. Junichi could tell the apartment was very dark inside. Through the 5-centimeter or 6-centimeter gap, a woman peeked outside, showing only half of her face.
Thank you,
She said coldly.
but I don't need it.
Her face was shadowed, so Junichi couldn't see her expression very well. He suddenly felt like he had gone to the wrong apartment. But he asked the woman again to take the pizza anyway. An uncomfortably warm air wafted out from within the apartment. Junichi smelled something strange. Finally, under the woman's face, 2 children's faces appeared right on top of each other. The door remained just barely cracked open. Junichi felt the empty eyes of the children staring at him. Their faces and their mothers all right on top of each other.
Oh, fine, we'll take it.
Junichi put the pizza box into the opening, and from an unnatural angle, a hand came out and took it.
Thank you.
He heard somebody say softly. Junichi left quickly. Something strange was going on in that apartment. He couldn't explain why, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something just wasn't right about the family. The children's faces, they appeared whenever he closed his eyes, their faces. Junichi felt a shiver run up his spine. Their faces, their heads, were all on top of each other's. They were stacked. He walked away even faster. He wanted to get away from them. The elevator wasn't coming fast enough. They were right on top of each other. He pushed the button again, but the elevator didn't make a sound. He walked towards the emergency stairs. His head throbbed in pain. He felt nauseous. When he began to push open the heavy door to the downstairs room, he felt somebody watching him. He turned around and saw not 10 meters away from him, faces peeking around the corner at him. Like when he had answered the door, he could only see half of their faces. They all had the same empty eyes. In the chilly hallway, their faces were clearly lit by the overhead lights. Junichi ran down the stairs as fast as he could, not caring about the brace around his neck. He usually used the stairs rather than the elevator for health reasons anyway, and he could easily go from the ground floor to the 4th floor rather quickly. Despite only going down 1 flight of stairs though, he felt like it had taken too long. There is no way they could be stacked like that. What happened to their bodies? And the thing behind them? Was there a hand holding them up? Was there something moving them, an arm moving them that I saw? Junichi called the police from a nearby convenience store. According to the investigation, the bodies of the mother and children were found in the bathtub. Their heads were missing. They had been sawed off 3 days before. Junichi went upstairs. Later that day, the husband was named a suspect and was found to be hiding in the building. When he was arrested, he was found to be carrying the heads with him. The man was not found in their apartment, though. The police searched the building thoroughly and found him hiding in a closet. A closet in Junichi's apartment. Here's a very simple but creepy pasta. It's just called Two Sisters. A young man was traveling alone when the following events took place. The man planned on driving until he could find a town with a hotel that he could sleep in. But after taking a wrong turn, he found himself on a dark, lonely path in the middle of the mountains. Unsure of what to do, he resigned himself to sleeping in his car for the night. As he sat in his car, an older woman who looked to be returning from her work in the fields appeared. "If you'd like, you can stay at my house for the night," she suggested when she got closer. "I can even have my granddaughter cook dinner for us." The man was dead tired. That, along with the prospects of a potentially cute granddaughter, helped him in his decision in accepting the woman's offer. The granddaughter, who appeared to be about his age, was quite beautiful, and she had an aura of tidiness about her. After dinner, he was getting ready to go to bed. The girl stealthily handed him a note as she passed him. It said, "Come to the shed at 11. The note read, "Make sure you're alone." The man was a little confused, but he wasn't stupid enough to refuse an invitation from a beautiful woman. When the clock struck 11 o'clock, the man quietly went out to the shed with very high expectations. When he opened the door, he was suddenly surrounded by a sweet perfume-like scent.
I'm pretty shy, so could you leave the light off?
The woman said quietly from within. The man agreed and closed the door behind him. He stepped forward, relying only on the voice in front of him and his fumbling hands to guide him. When his hands finally reached the woman's body, he was surprised to find she was already naked. This far surpassed what he had originally hoped for, and he quickly took off his own clothes. Despite the woman's reserved behavior at dinner, she was very enthusiastic. Her skin was already sticky and moist from vigorous activities. He couldn't see her face, but he was pleased at her physical and vocal reactions. Every time he thought that he was finished, she pulled him closer, and everything began again.
My grandmother will get mad if she catches us,
she said just before the sun came up.
We need to go back to our bedrooms.
The man agreed and quickly left for his own bed. Not long after, he went back into the house, and the old woman came out of her bedroom. He thanked her profusely for her kindness before leaving the family behind. As he was walking down the street to his car, a farmer approached him. "You aren't from around here, are you? Did you have a place to spend the night?" The young man explained that he spent the night with the older woman and her granddaughter. "Ah, that family," the old man said thoughtfully. "If I can be completely honest with you, that family has quite a sad story behind it. The woman actually has 2 granddaughters living with her. But the elder doesn't get out much. You see, she has an illness. It eats away at her skin. From the top of her head to the tips of her toes, her skin is literally festering and melting off." Oh, this is a really good one I found searching deep with the interwebs. I found something very spooky. Maybe too spooky for you. Let's take a look. It's just called The Doll's Room. Takumi was a young boy living in a house in rural Japan. While most things about his home were normal, there was one thing that stood out as being strange. A room that he and everyone else was forbidden from entering. However, Takumi was a very curious boy. The more he was told not to enter the room, the more he wanted to see what was inside. One day, when the rest of the family was out, he snuck into the room. When he got inside, he was shocked at what he found. Nothing. Nothing at all. It was just a normal bedroom. He sensed nothing weird about it, and the sunlight coming through the window made it almost a delightful place to be. There was nothing scary at all about this room. He wondered if maybe his family just didn't want him to make a mess in there, and so they were just trying to scare him off. The bedroom was quite warm, and before he knew it, Takumi fell asleep. A few hours later, he woke up. He didn't have any paralyzing, horrifying dreams, and nothing seemed to have happened while he was asleep. He was pretty certain that nothing mysterious was going on in this room. As he was just about to leave the room, he got the urge to open up one of the drawers in the bureau. All the drawer contained was a small, Japanese-style doll. He opened the other drawers and found only clothing. Why did that one drawer have such a small doll in it? What is so important about this doll? Takumi stared at the doll. After a few moments, he was overtaken by a fear like he had never felt before. Later, after his family returned, Takumi asked his grandmother about the room. She told him that many years ago the room had belonged to his father's younger sister, Haruko. 30-some years ago, the house was remodeled into a duplex. Apparently, there was a garden located where the new part of the building was built over, and that land was tainted. Haruko's room, which was now the Forbidden Room, stood on the land from the moment the house was remodeled. From the time she had entered the room, she had began acting very odd. The first thing that her family noticed was that she began having trouble sleeping in her bedroom. No matter how she tried, she would inevitably wake up at 3 a.m. every morning. When she woke up, the lights in her room would all be turned on, despite having turned them off before going to sleep. Even worse, she said there was a young girl that would be sitting on her bed. Despite the room being brightly lit, the girl's face would be shrouded in darkness. Somehow, Haruko could still sense that girl was smiling. For about a week, this continued until Haruko began avoiding her bedroom. She was quite independent though, so at first she didn't want to trouble her family with what was going on. After that week, she gave up and told her father about her fears. "Well, no wonder you can't get married," he'd scream. "If you bring it up again, you can find your own place to live." About 2 weeks later, Takumi's grandmother remembered Haruko's complaints. Haruko had stopped talking about what was going on in her room and even started smiling again. Her mother began to think that maybe she had started to get used to the new house and decided to ask about it. "Nothing has changed," she said, with a smile. "I've just gotten used to my new room." At first there was just one girl, but now there are so many more, and they're all watching me whenever they can. Haruko's voice raised in an eerie high-pitched laugh. Her mother couldn't help but notice that it was nothing at all like Haruko's normal laugh. Maybe the ghosts she spoke of actually were real, or maybe they were just dreams or illusions. Regardless of which was the truth, it was already too late. Haruko's room was right next to her parents', and one night her mother heard strange noises coming from her room against the wall. Unsure of what was happening, she hurried into the next room and was shocked by what she saw. Haruko had ripped the tatami mats, that's the strong woven mats that you see in Japanese rooms, from the floor and was desperately digging a hole in the ground with her bare hands. "What are you doing?" her mother screamed without thinking. Haruko didn't seem to notice. If anything, she was smiling. Haruko continued digging until she seemed to find something. There it is! There it is! She whispered to herself, and finally pulled herself out from under the floor. In her hands was a small, Japanese-style doll that was so clean it was difficult to believe it had been under the ground. Haruko handed over the doll to her mother with a smile still on her face. She walked away and then began banging her head violently against the wall. "What's wrong with you?" Her mother rushed over and tried to calm her, but it was no use. Haruko was somehow too strong to be stopped. "You're right. What am I doing? I don't know. For just a moment, Haruko seemed to doubt what she was doing, but she quickly lost her lucidity, raised her head again, and with another strange laugh, violently smashed it against the wall. That's when her mother heard it. Mixed in Haruko's voice were the voices of a dozen small children. Haruko continued hitting her head on the wall for more than 10 minutes. Suddenly, she stood up straight and immediately collapsed. She looked just like a marionette, Haruko's mother, Takumi's grandmother, said. Haruko's father, woken up by the sounds in the next room, had already called an ambulance. When she was brought to the hospital, the doctor stated that she was in extremely bad condition. Her medulla oblongata, brainstem, and skull were severely damaged. When her mother explained to the doctors what had happened, they didn't believe her. Did she really do this to herself? This sort of brain damage is impossible to inflict upon oneself in the manner that you describe. Her father, feeling that he let his daughter die, went to a priest at the temple to see if he could do anything. If anything could possibly be done, maybe to cleanse the house. Somebody agreed to look into the bedroom. Upon entering the threshold of the bedroom, the priest vomited. Once again he had regained his composure, He said that a shrine dedicated to aborted fetuses and children lost to the plague were once located in Haruko's bedroom. It was underneath the ground where the bedroom currently stood. Because the room had been built where the shrine was, many of the spirits were now gathering there. "You cannot use this room anymore," the priest insisted in a threatening manner. Haruko's mother showed the doll to the priest and asked him to take it with him. "I want nothing to do with this doll," he said. "I don't want to risk doing a slipshod exorcism, as that will only make the situation worse. Dispose of it. Burn it if you have to." Haruko's mother followed the priest's advice. She tried throwing it away, and she tried burning it. Every time she thought she got rid of the doll, though, it would reappear in the room. When she threw the doll away again, and again, and again, it would show up again on the dresser. When she tried burning the doll, it wouldn't light on fire. And instead, ashes from the fire would pop out and hit the house instead. Time after time, things like this happened, and she finally gave up on getting rid of the doll. She reburied the doll where Haruko had found it, and everyone was banned from the room. She explained to Takumi that the events were too painful to think of, and she didn't want to burden him with such things. "I don't know if burning the doll was the right thing to do," she said, "but it's done and over. As long as the doll stays there, we are safe." Takumi avoided looking at his grandmother. "It's already out of the ground," he whispered to himself. Alright guys, it's back to Camera Obscura with Ghosts on Camera. Tonight I'm going to do it just a little bit differently. Don't worry, I'm going to show you the footage. But instead of having me talk over it in kind of a mundane manner, I'm going to go ahead and just translate what the people said into subtitles that you will see at the bottom of the screen. I hope you enjoy. guys, there you go. Simple scares. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you were entertained. I hope you liked everything you saw tonight, and if you did, please visit some of the people who contributed for tonight's, and also please share, like, subscribe, let your friends know about it, and as always, feel free to share your favorite creepypastas and ghosts on film with us here at Osoroshi Saturday. We'd love to have you as part of the team and part of the show. Once again, I'm Unrested, and this is
Osoroshi Saturday.
We created the perfect soldier. We called him the Death Corps.
What's the matter?
I don't know. Did you hear anything?
I don't think so. Now I do.